I never expected my homecoming to become a full-blown confrontation with the most infamous figure in our neighborhood. But that's exactly what happened the day I returned from deployment. After 18 long months embedded overseas as a federal agent within a military intelligence task force, I imagined a simple, joyful reunion with my wife and kids. Instead, I found myself face-to-face with Eleanor Bishop, the self-declared queen of our homeowners association. Or, as everyone else called her when she wasn't around, HOA Eleanor. My plan was straightforward. My brother-in-law, Marcus, was going to help me sneak into our home while my wife, Lila, picked up our children from school. We weren't planning fireworks or a marching band, just a modest welcome banner in the front yard, and maybe some balloons tied to the mailbox. Enough to make the moment feel special when they pulled into the driveway. I was still in my dress uniform, the one I had worn on the transport plane from Ramstein. Marcus met me at the airport and drove us home. We were unloading my bags from his trunk, laughing quietly, trying to move quickly before Lila returned, when we heard the unmistakable voice. "Excuse me, how exactly do you think you're doing?" Her words cut through the quiet, suburban air like a blade. Eleanor Bishop stood across the street, storming toward us with her signature clipboard clutched in one hand and a smug look that made it very clear she wasn't coming over to welcome me home. She was dressed in her usual uniform white blouse buttoned to the neck, a chunky pearl necklace, and khakis so stiff they could stand on their own. Her silvery gray hair was pulled into a bun so tight it could double as a knot for a sailing line. Her narrowed eyes were locked on the small banner Marcus was securing to the lawn. Marcus froze mid-step, his hands still wrapped around a stake, but I kept walking toward the door. I wasn't about to let this woman ruin the moment. I turned to her and nodded politely. "Hello, ma'am. Just coming home to surprise my family." She squinted at me, her lips curling into something halfway between suspicion and disgust. "And you are?" "Cole Manning," I replied evenly, despite the exhaustion creeping through my bones. "I live here. This is my house." Eleanor's eyes swept over my uniform like it was a Halloween costume. "Do you have a permit for that sign?" Marcus blinked. "Excuse me." She tapped her clipboard. Section 9, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that any yard signage or decorative elements must be submitted for approval with a minimum 14-day notice. That includes celebratory banners. And that uniform, is that real? Or are you dressed up for some themed event? I inhaled slowly, locking down the irritation bubbling inside. My wife had mentioned during our weekly video chats that Eleanor had been elected HOA president while I was away. Lila had joked that Eleanor ran the neighborhood like it was a boot camp for lawn etiquette. I never imagined I'd be facing her on my own doorstep. "Ma'am," I said with as much grace as I could muster, "I've been deployed overseas for a year and a half. I just got back. The banner is only staying up for a few hours to surprise my wife and kids." "Rules are rules, Mr. Manning, if that is indeed your real name," she snapped. "And by the way, I don't recall receiving any extended absence forms from this address. That alone constitutes a violation. And don't get me started on the condition of your lawn during the summer. We issued 3 formal notices while you were allegedly abroad." Marcus, usually the quiet one, finally stepped in. "Eleanor, come on. Cole's been serving this country. Let the man welcome his family home. It's just a banner." But Eleanor was already pulling out her phone. "No exceptions. I'm documenting this. And unless you can produce identification proving residency, I'll be escalating this." She began taking photos of me, of the sign, of Marcus holding the stake in the grass. The camera shutter clicking felt more intrusive than I'd expected. It wasn't just the photos. It was the way she loomed, phone raised, as if I were a criminal she'd caught in the act. "Ma'am," I said, squaring my shoulders, "I'd appreciate it if you didn't take photos of me. I'm a federal agent. You're bordering on harassment." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Anyone can say that. You could be impersonating military personnel. That's a felony, by the way. Let's see your ID." She stepped forward. Her hand moved to the small holster bulge under my jacket. "Is that a weapon?" "It is," I said firmly, retrieving my badge. "I'm a federal agent with active clearance. I'm legally authorized to carry." You can confirm everything with this. I handed over my credentials, expecting that to put an end to it. Instead, Eleanor's face twisted into something manic. A likely story. First a fake banner, now a fake badge. You're impersonating a government official with a gun on our street. She retreated a step and called 911. Right there, standing on my front lawn. Yes, hello. I need to report a man dressed in military clothing, armed, acting aggressively. He claims to be someone he's not. I feel very unsafe. Marcus stared at me, disbelief plain on his face. I raised my phone and started recording. Ma'am, you're making false statements to law enforcement. I've identified myself and shown you official documentation. Eleanor's lips curled. Recording me without consent? That's another HOA violation. Section 12-inch. Federal law supersedes HOA bylaws. I interrupted. She was mid-rant when the police arrived. Two officers approached cautiously, hands near their holsters. I immediately raised my hands, identified myself, and presented my badge again. The older officer, a Navy vet judging by his sleeve tattoo, squinted at my documents. Then his posture softened. Agent Manning? Welcome home. Sorry about the reception. He gave me a respectful nod and glared at Eleanor. This is ridiculous, she shrieked. He violated HOA signage policies and, ma'am, the officer said firmly, did you call 911 to report a banner? I called about an armed trespasser impersonating military personnel, she said indignantly. Which was false, the younger officer added, reviewing the footage I had just airdropped to their device. You were informed of his credentials before your call. That's a criminal misuse of emergency resources. Eleanor paled, but doubled down. I was doing my duty as HOA president. How was I to know he wasn't dangerous? Anyone can order a uniform online. The older officer sighed. Be that as it may, this gentleman clearly lives here, and you've now made a false police report against a federal agent. I didn't know he was real. I'm willing to let it go, I interjected. If MS. Bishop agrees to drop this and let us get back to our lives. The officers gave Eleanor one last out. But predictably, she refused it. This isn't over, she hissed. You'll be hearing from the HOA board. Expect a violation notice. And fines. She stormed off. I shook my head, grateful the worst was behind me. Or so I thought. The next morning, I woke up to a violation notice taped to our door $500 fine for unapproved signage, unauthorized absence, and threatening HOA personnel. There was even mention of eviction proceedings. That was the final straw. I spent the next 24 hours gathering testimonies from neighbors' elderly folks fined for potted plants, a single mom penalized for a trampoline, a veteran written up for flying a faded American flag. Then I contacted the HOA's legal counsel directly. I detailed Eleanor's behavior, her abuse of authority, and the recording of her false police report. I mentioned carefully but clearly that interfering with a federal agent could be escalated to a criminal investigation. Within 48 hours, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Eleanor was removed as president. She was fined $2,000 personally, and the HOA sent a written apology to my family. When I returned from my second deployment, 2 years later, the sign that greeted me wasn't just a welcome home banner. It was a garden planted by the neighbors themselves, red, white, and blue tulips underneath a wooden plaque that read, "Welcome home, Agent Manning. This street stands with you." And not a single clipboard in sight.